Welcome to the Maple Money Show, the podcast that helps Canadians improve their personal finances to create lasting financial freedom. Today on the show, we're going to be talking about the struggles that millennials are facing when it comes to their finances. And to do that, I brought on millennial money expert Jessica Moorhouse. She's an Accredited Financial Counsellor Canada, and you can find her at jessicamoorhouse.com or listen to the Mo Money podcast. Before we move on, I want to thank our sponsors, Borrowell. It's important to know your credit score, whether you're looking for a personal loan, a car loan, or a mortgage. All of that is affected by your credit score. Not only can you get the loan, but also what interest rate you're paying. Luckily, Borrowell has the Equifax credit score, and you can get it completely for free. My wife and I both did it. It took us less than 3 minutes each. You just need to head over to maplemoney.com/Borrowell. That's maplemoney.com/BORROWELL. You can get your free credit score today. Now let's chat with Jessica. Hi, Jessica. Welcome to the Maple Money Show.
Well, thank you for having me on, Tom.
So you're my very first guest. This is the second episode. And the reason I brought you on is because you're a big name in Canada, especially with your podcast. And I know you deal with a lot of millennial issues, and I wanted to talk about that.
Well, I'm super excited to dive in, and thanks for having me as your first guest. I'm so honored.
Thanks for being on. I guess right off the bat, is there a number one struggle that you hear from millennials?
I would say there's like 2, possibly 3. So these are the kind of most common ones that I get all the time. So it's either they are starting to kind of get to know more about money management. They're getting older, they're realizing this, and they're like, oh, I have to get my stuff together. And usually they take a look at what's going on with their finances and they realize, oh, wow, I have like a huge student debt, credit card debt, all this debt basically. And so they start panicking. They're like, oh my gosh, I had no idea that I'm actually like 35K in the hole. What do I do? And so that is a big struggle. They're like, how do I actually attack this? I didn't realize it had gotten so bad. The other big struggle is for people that are kind of like, I feel like similar to me in that I've, never really dealt with a debt, but I've always had this issue with, am I doing it right? So like that financial confidence, I'd say maybe that would be the number one thing. And then the debt component after that. And so a lot of people that, read my blog, listen to my show and stuff, a lot of them are, men, but a lot of them are mainly women, and they have this issue that they think that they're doing it right. They, listen to my podcast, they read other people's blogs, they're very knowledgeable, but they're so not sure or confident if they're like, am I on the right path? Am I missing something? And I used to be the exact same way too. I've been blogging for almost 7 years, and it really wasn't up until like 2, maybe 3 years ago that I started to feel actually like, no, I can have a conversation with someone at a party about investments and hold my own and not feel like I'm an imposter. So the imposter syndrome with finance is so real. It's insane.
So it's more a confidence issue for a lot of them than actually.
Yeah, because we're in this really great age where there's so much information, so much free information out there. And yes, there's some bad advice and bad information out there. But in general, if you really just take some time to educate yourself, you'll be able to figure out how to, manage your own finances totally fine. But I think a lot of us need, and maybe this has to do with how we were brought up in our generation, getting those gold stars all the time, always having teachers. I don't know. We always feel like someone has to tell us, but is this is right? Is it, and I was the exact same way. And eventually you just have to, and what I try to, educate people about is, you need to, if you don't quite understand, or sometimes you really just need to take some more time to educate yourself, that's how that confidence builds. For me, I self-taught myself with all this, read books, blogs, and I listened to podcasts and all that kind of stuff. But for me, it wasn't actually until I took my first like formal personal finance course through the Canadian Securities Institute that I actually am like, oh yeah, I know this. Like I already knew this. So why did I not think I knew this? Again, that's a millennial thing. It's like I needed to take a course to make sure I knew what I was doing.
Yeah, I think your story is similar to mine, where you start off just consuming all the information from books or blogs and everything, but And that'll take you a long way. And really, one of the things is there's not always a right way, is there? Sometimes you almost have to try things out, maybe make some mistakes and figure out what works for you.
Exactly. And that's the also another hard thing to really grasp and understand is it isn't so black and white in personal finance. There isn't always the right way and the wrong way. There is for a lot of things. It's like, no, you should definitely do it this way. This will work. But there's a lot of different topics where you can do something completely different than someone and still get a really good result. I'd say a big thing too is one thing that I noticed, especially talking to other people in the personal finance space, or just people that were, personally interested in personal finance and did a lot of research, is a lot of people have very strong opinions. And sometimes if you're not confident with the information that you have, you'll take their opinions as fact. And then you're like, oh, so maybe I'm doing it wrong. Maybe I should do this. And then you look more into it. You're like, no, actually, I think they're wrong. Or I don't agree with how they're doing it. It doesn't work for me personally. So there's a lot of different elements. It's not just about financial literacy, very important component, but a lot of it is really understanding who you are, what your goals are, what your values are, and understanding when people communicate to you about personal finance, what's their MO, where are they coming from, what are their values and opinions, and that will kind of give you a better understanding. Like, oh, okay, so I get what they're talking about, but I just don't agree. It's not for me.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I was thinking. I've seen, especially with like bigger celebrities, they sort of have to draw that line in the sand where they say something and they keep it simple so a lot of people can follow it. But sometimes simple isn't always right. You may not get a 12% return on your investments just because they say you will. You have to take some common sense and just try things out. You had mentioned paying off debt being a big problem. How do you sort of respond to that when someone brings that up? Do you have a favorite way of dealing with debt?
Favorite way. You know what? So one thing too, I also get usually in that debt conversation, a lot of people are like, oh, I have debt. I don't know what to do, but I'm really interested in investing because that's way more sexy than paying off debt. Paying off debt is like you're dealing with an issue, a problem that you started 3, 5, 10 years ago. And now you're like, oh, I should deal with that. But investing looks cool because if I, invest my money, I can make money. That's way more enticing. So what I try to encourage people to do is like, well, first make a debt repayment plan for sure. And we can kind of get into that too, what different ways you can do that. But also there's nothing wrong with also investing at the same time. I feel like a lot of the information that I consumed, in my 20s, a lot about debt repayment, it was so focused on like, do everything you can to pay off your debt, throw all of your money at debt. And a lot of these people will get back into debt after hitting that zero mark because they didn't actually know what steps to take after. That's all I knew is how to repay debt. So they always kind of get into this debt cycle. You need to create better habits for yourself, savings habits, investing habits. So once you have become debt free, you can easily just transport that money you're dedicating to debt and putting it into your savings accounts, into your investments. And so that's why I always encourage them, like, if you are paying off debt, I think it's so important to, at the same time, be putting money into your savings account for your emergency fund and also starting to slowly invest. Because, nowadays it's so easy to set up an investment account with a Robo Advisor or doing it yourself. And you don't need that much money to start. Like literally, I think most robo advisors don't have a minimum. Like you can have like $100 or something to start. So that's something that I always encourage people to do. And then you also feel like you're taking care of your problem, but you're also doing kind of that exciting part of investing and seeing your net worth grow.
I like that idea, sort of starting the habit of investing. I was a strict numbers guy. I had a little bit of debt from college, nothing major, but it was just looking straight at numbers. I did the format of paying the highest interest debt first, working my way down, and then I started saving and investing. That worked for me just because all I see is numbers. Yeah. But I totally get the idea that for a lot of people, setting that habit of paying off debt and investing is probably a great idea. Can we get into some of those debt payment ideas?
Yes.
sort of different options for these different kind of people?
Yeah. So, well, you mentioned one of them. So, when I talk to people about debt, there's kind of like the three, well, there's two, and then kind of a bonus one that you can kind of do. And I actually just wrote about this for my blog, but the three, kind of main ones that everyone should be aware of, even if you don't know debt, is there's obviously the debt avalanche method, which is what you mentioned, attacking your most expensive debt first. So that's the one with the highest interest, and paying the minimum balances on all the rest of your debts, but throwing extra money, as much as you can afford within your budget onto the most expensive debt. The next one is the debt snowball one, which I found when talking to people, honestly, they kind of gravitate towards that one. And that was made popular by Dave Ramsey, who's really big in the States. And that one is really about attacking your smallest debt first. And honestly, you are going to be spending more money on interest doing that method. But for me, if I were in a debt situation, I'd probably go with that method too, because you get that easy win right off the bat. So if you had, three different debts, one was 10,000, one was 5,000, and one was 1,000. Well, you can knock that first debt off pretty quickly because it's very small. And then you get that win. You're like, oh, look, I'm 1/3 of the way there. I'm almost debt free because I was able to knock that first debt off. And then on top of that, as kind of something to add on, is the debt snowflake method, which is really if you get any kind of free money, additional money, and that could take the form of your tax refund. You get a monetary gift for your birthday or a holiday. If you have a little side hustle, you don't know what to do with the money, or a bonus at work, you throw that extra free money onto your debt, so it kind of accelerates how long it'll take you to pay off all of your debts.
Awesome. A lot of this sounds like people sort of just needing to get organized with their debt payment. But are there any other issues where maybe people are getting disorganized with their finances? Kind of, again, just optimizing things. Is there other times that happening?
Oh, absolutely. Well, that's 100%. When people, approach me to work with me as a financial counselor, that is kind of the main thing that they're like, I'm not like terrible with my money, or yes, I have some debt, but I think I'm doing something. A lot of it is they're like, but I just feel so disorganized and I'm stressed out about it. And for me, I'm a spreadsheets person. I love to organize. Lately, I've been getting into this weird habit of like cleaning everything in the house at like 10 p.m. It really annoys my husband, but I'm an organization freak. And so really, there's a couple foundational things that everyone needs to know, even if they don't have debt, but they still kind of feel like they're floundering, or they're just kind of like coasting with their finances. They don't know what to do. These three things, these are things that I do in my own life. They've really, really helped me feel like I know what's going on with my money at all times. It's setting up a budget, which is just a spending plan. I think a lot of people hate that word budget, and I totally get it because it's very overused. So that's why I usually like to say it's a spending plan. It is literally just where do you want to allocate your income? Let's just talk about that, and organizing that into like, okay, you're going to save your money here, and these are why you're going to say, there's your savings buckets, your savings goals, and then allocate your the rest of the income to your fixed expenses and your variable expenses. It's very simple, very good. Yeah. And then next is tracking your spending. And this is something that I personally do manually, because for me, I've tried pretty much every app out there and none of them really work. Like it's nice. It's a nice idea to automate it, but sorry, it's not going to change your spending habits. It's going to just you're just going to perpetuate the problem. So this is something I do. I've got a spreadsheet. I just, download that information from my bank, my credit cards, companies, and you should usually just download a CSV file and then just copy and paste that information to your spreadsheet, so you know exactly how much you're spending every month, to see if it's close to what you're budgeted, if it's off, if it's under, so you know what's going on. And then the last component is tracking your net worth, so you see what your progress is month over month and year over year. Once you have those things set up, 100% you will feel so much more confident and like, I know what's going on, because you have all that information. And that's really the most important thing you need to do.
Exactly. That's great. You mentioned not liking an app, and it seems there's a lot of apps for finance, and they're normally squarely at millennials. Are there any apps that you do like? Anything from saving money, investing money, any kind of app that's connected to money?
See, I think my issue with a lot of these apps, and I've talked to a lot of the people behind these apps, is honestly none of them come from a place of really knowing that much about money. Like they're developers, they're marketers, they're business people. They don't come from a finance background. And so they just kind of see this industry, this niche. Oh, we should create an app. Everyone deals with money. But I'm like, but how do you act? Like if you actually legit talk to these people, like how do you manage your money? It's like, they don't probably use that app. I've talked to a lot of successful people that make, really good money, doing really well in their careers. When I ask them, like, how do you do, they legit use a spreadsheet. So I'm like, okay, if those people are like killing it and they've got, probably more complicated finances than I do, and they just use a simple spreadsheet, that's probably the route to go. But since you asked me some apps that I do like, well, first, I'm a big fan of Robo Advisors for investing. I think they're a great invention. I'm so glad that they're here. One thing I have started to use, I don't use it too frequently, but I do like the idea of it. Made like $10 off it, is just Ebates. So I try not to do a lot of shopping and, try to live a pretty frugal lifestyle relatively. But when I do buy stuff online or on Amazon or whatever, I do go through Ebates just to make a little bit of extra money. But I'm always kind of conscious that I think if a lot of people were to use Ebates more, they would maybe be more enticed to spend more shopping and stuff because of that gamification. So I'm on the fence about that one. I like it because I know I won't abuse it, but I feel like most people may kind of abuse it unconsciously. Let me see if there's another one. No, there's not. Like I to be fair, I do hear from a lot of my readers and people in my Facebook group. They really like YNAB. You need a budget. And again, it's like if anything, if if there's something out there that helps you with your money, then I'd say do it. Just for me, I've tried all of them and they just do not work for me. They just do not.
Yeah. Well, one thing you mentioned with the Ebates, I used to spend a lot of time on the deal section of Red Flag Deals.
Yeah, I remember. Yeah, I used to do the same.
I was buying so much stuff because it was a deal, and it's a bit of the Costco effect for me too. But everything's a deal, so you do end up spending more. And
well, you think about spending more if you're on all these coupon sites or and all these things that are technically like to help you save money.
Yeah.
I mean, I generally I don't really do couponing because that's honestly a whole different world. I just don't care about it. I know lots of people are passionate about it. That's great. Same with like credit card rewards and stuff. I'm like, that is great. But I'm also like, I don't really care. And I know I could probably be getting free trips and all that stuff, but I just, it's not my passion. So I can't do it. But yeah, I feel like when you are kind of like going to these websites or using these apps, you start thinking about like buying more. And so you like almost unintentionally spend more money. So that's for me, like, that's why I need to make sure I always like clear my cache every once in a while. Cause then I'll be retargeted all the time. Cause I go to lots of websites and I do a lot of window shopping or put things in my cart and then just abandon. Cause I'm like, no, you don't need that. Move away. And then I get retargeted and then I, think about it. So yeah. Dangerous.
Yeah, if you look at anything, it's going to follow you around till you buy it.
Oh, I know. It's evil.
So you've been pretty good with your money even before you started blogging and everything. Mm-hmm. Is there one good story of a mistake that you've made before that you don't mind?
I've made tons of mistakes.
Okay.
Tons of mistakes.
What's the worst?
I mean, I'd say a big one recently was, and it's not a big one, but just like, this is stupid and embarrassing, Jessica, you know better, is I guess maybe 6 years ago, or not 6 years ago, sorry, 6 months ago, my husband and I chose to move financial institutions. And it's such a terrible process moving financial institutions because there's so much paperwork. You have to track things to be like, has it moved over yet? How are we going to pay our credit card, this account or this account? Is this one closed yet? And so in the process of doing this, we also went on vacation. And that week, we kind of like shut off, didn't look at our phones. And my mortgage bounced because I thought it was going to go out of one account, but it actually went out to the other one and there was no money in that one. And that was embarrassing. Like I remember getting a voicemail from mortgage to be like, it bounced. I'm like, oh, this is so unlike me. What happened? Yeah. So that is a recent money mistake. And that was just like, that's just how it goes. It sucks. I felt so bad. I called them immediately. I'm so sorry. I had money when it was in a different account.
I have to admit, I did the exact same thing. I was transferring banks. It wasn't the mortgage. It was just a utility bill, I think, was coming out. And sure enough, it bounced. And my first thought was like, I'm a personal finance
I
blogger.
know. I can't do this. I can't tell anybody this.
Yeah.
But you know what? I think, and this is something that I used to think, I'm like, oh, as a, millennial money expert or whatever, I can't make a mistake because, people expect an expert to be perfect.
Yeah.
But actually, when I share like money mistakes, stupid things I've done, most people appreciate it because it humanizes you. And it's true. It's like, I'm human. Yeah, I'm good with my money. This is something that I've developed over years and it's something I actively do, but that doesn't mean that I don't mess up once in a while. I'm human.
Yeah, I've always figured it's the same. Like I watch a lot of hockey, Edmonton Oilers at least, but even the best players gonna do something dumb sometime and just totally miss or something. So it does happen. One more question I just wanted to ask you was: everybody's coming to you via your Facebook group and as a counselor and everything. Is there something that people that come to you should be asking but don't?
Oh, that's a really good question. Should be asking, but don't. Ooh, I would say, You know what? I'd say a lot of people come to me to ask questions about, what do you think about this or this, this? A lot of them don't really think about the why, actually. They think about the how, the what, but in general, they don't necessarily think about, what's the bigger picture here? Why do you want to do this? What are your values? Like kind of getting a little bit more into that psychology, the money mindset stuff. A lot of people don't even know. I mean, unless you're really into the personal finance world, know that, oh, mindfulness is really trending right now. Like no one knows about that kind of crap. And so I think when I initially talk to someone and really going through like, so what's the problem and how do you want to solve it and all that stuff, I really go like, okay, let's take a step back and really talk about like, number one, why did you get into this situation? Why do you want to get out? And what do you want your kind of future to look like? And a lot of them they're like, oh, I've actually never thought about that. They're like, I just know I'm supposed to save for retirement, but I've never thought about what retirement actually looks like for me or when do I want to retire or anything like that.
They know enough to go through the motions, but not necessarily.
Yeah, like it really is like, and I just hear over and over, it's like, well, I know I'm supposed to do this, but they never really think about, but why? And lots of people just don't talk about the why. They're just like, stop spending money, pay down debt. And you're like, yeah, but why though?
Nice. Yeah. Good point. Well, thanks for being on the show. And can you tell everyone where to find you?
Absolutely. So you can find me on my website, jessicamoorhouse.com. Of course, I've got my own podcast called the Mo Money Podcast. You can find on iTunes and anywhere that there's a podcast app. And you can always hit me up on Twitter. I'm there most all the time at JESSI_MOORHOUSE, Jessie_Moorhouse.
Great. Thanks for being on the show.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks again to Jessica for coming on the show. You can find show notes for this episode at maplemoney.com/Jessica Moorhouse. If you're a new listener, you can subscribe to the show on iTunes for audio or YouTube if you prefer video. Thanks for listening to The Maple Money Show.